BYU's undefeated. Well, they're obviously the favorite in the Big 12, just by lieu of their record, of course. Who's challenging them? Drake Tolock on Big 12 here to discuss that with me. I don't know, Drake. Nobody actually wants to win this league. I'm convinced BYU will lose at least one regular season game or at least the conference championship game. The magic has to end at some point, right? Wink, wink. Serious question. Who wants to win this league?
What?
Good answer.
For Big 12 fans, the first thing they'll think when they hear that is, did you not know about the Colorado Buffs who have only lost one game in conference, or the BYU Cougars who are undefeated in conference, or both teams that are on a winning streak and playing maybe Colorado their best football quite possibly, and for BYU they just have this knack for winning games at the very end when they need to, or blowing people out like they did UCF or Kansas State. So if you think about nobody wanting to win the Big 12, I would say nobody outside of two teams wants to win the Big 12 right now. Kansas State slipping against Houston, Iowa State losing 2 straight. But all you need for the conference championship is 2 teams, BYU and Colorado. And both of those teams are on a crash course for the Big 12 championship game. So maybe nobody does want to win this conference if it was a 14-team league, sans those 2 teams. But guess what, Spencer? They still exist in this league, and unlike Utah, which has brought us down to 15 now, those 2 are here, and they're winning football games. And as long as that's the case, the Big 12's got the Buffs and the Cougars in a college football playoff matchup in Arlington where if BYU loses, you might get 2 teams in.
Yeah, I think that's the only scenario where you get 2 teams in. I think Colorado's schedule coming down the stretch with Utah not being any good and Kansas having a sub 500 record. Kansas still capable of going bowling, by the way, after their upset of Iowa State last week. Some people picked Utah and Kansas to make the Big 12 championship game. I don't know who those people are.
Joel Klatt. And you and I said Joel Klatt just may not know ball.
Yeah.
Preseason we said it also.
Exactly, which is why we are on this show and Joel Klatt obviously is not. So those 2 teams are on Colorado's schedule coming down the stretch. BYU has to go to Tempe and play Arizona State. I ask you right now, you have to place $50, probably with our friends at FanDuel, on one of those teams losing coming down the stretch. Who are you banking on?
Oh, man. The problem with BYU is they play so many of their 3 teams that are hot right now. I mean, Houston's playing its best football. TCU's playing its best football. Arizona State, the very same. That's where it gets a bit fuzzy. Now, is BYU at home on a night game this week? Yeah, no doubt. They're great in that scenario, but still, those 3 games are a gauntlet. And for Colorado, well, you've already mentioned, now all of a sudden the Buffs are not just a Big 12 contender, but a college football playoff contender. They have to keep winning. Both of these teams have to keep winning because of that Kansas State loss. The Wildcats are hoping the Buffs will lose. They drop into a tiebreaker scenario somehow, and there Kansas State sits waiting for the Big 12 championship. And Spencer, I think you would agree, if Kansas State wins the Big 12 championship, you might not be looking at a first-round bye. That 4 seed might go to Boise State. I mean, there's a legitimate scenario where the Big 12 gets really snubbed by a Kansas State or even a Colorado victory in the Big 12 championship. But to answer the question you asked, I do think because BYU seems like this team of wild destiny, Colorado might slip first, though I'm not very confident that BYU's schedule the rest of the way is that easy, though I do see Utah and Kansas both giving the Buffs at least a little trouble.
The great thing about this league is it's even more spectacular than we anticipated before the season. Before the year, we came in and said this is going to be the most competitive, this is going to be the deepest conference championship race in the country. Now, the SEC certainly has a case to be made here, but I don't feel like the bottom of the SEC can beat the top of the SEC. Vanderbilt is not the bottom of the SEC. South Carolina is not the bottom of the SEC. Those are just pretty good football teams over there. The bottom of the Big 12, Kansas or Utah, can beat the top of the Big 12. I mean, Utah all but had it in their grasps, and then they got a little bit too much of the grasp in the eyes of the official to keep the game alive and whatnot, but they could have beaten BYU over the weekend. So BYU, a short favorite at home this week against Kansas, yeah, of course they can lose that football game, but I have brought up before what you just alluded to, which is there is a realistic world where the Big 12 champion, if it isn't BYU, I think it's almost assured the Big 12 champion isn't going to get a first round bye. We'll see what happens in the college football playoff rankings rankings that come out later today as this show airs.
Well,
but if it's not BYU, who's going to have a win that leapfrogs them ahead of Boise State?
I want to give BYU fans some solace here. If you lose the Big 12 championship game, you probably end up, if you're 12-1, with the 5 or 6 seed playing a home game. Provo, Utah, college football playoff, night game. That kind of rocks. If you're the coaching staff, you hate it. Give me the bye. If you're the fans, that's cool. And then the Kansas State or the Colorado, who's still sitting there, might be in the 9 or the 10 range playing a road game in the first round of the playoffs. We'll see how that pans out. But I do want to push back a bit here. We have seen...
Could you imagine, really quick, could you imagine? I don't think the playoff committee would do this, but we've never seen a 12-team playoff before.
True.
What if Kansas State, just as an example, beats BYU in the Big 12 championship game? BYU doesn't have the bye. Kansas State doesn't have the bye. Any chance that they get rematched in the college football playoff round 1?
That would be... No, there is no chance, but it'd be
okay. That's what I thought, but then
kind of funny, right?
It would be. I don't know, but there are a lot of things in college football that make me feel that way.
March Madness would never pit 2 in-conference teams against each other round 1, maybe round 2. I think the playoff would work the same way for football. Let me push back a bit though with your argument about the SEC. We saw Kentucky beat Ole Miss. We saw Ole Miss beat Georgia. Like the cream of the crop in the SEC.
Well,
right
Ole
now,
Miss lost to Georgia, but they pushed Georgia. Yes, that's a fair point.
Ole Miss beat Georgia.
Ole Miss. Sorry, I was thinking Kentucky. You're right.
So
I'm out of it.
Beat Ole Miss, and then Kentucky ends up being really, really bad at football, and then Ole Miss beats Georgia. So transitive property doesn't work in college football, right? Georgia struggles against Kentucky. They still win that game, okay? I'm not saying Kentucky's better, but we've seen bottom-tier teams, bottom of the conference in the SEC, Arkansas beating Tennessee. There is still parity in the SEC.
Arkansas is not a bottom feeder, though.
They're not very good at football right now. We just saw them get killed by Ole Miss. And again, Kentucky is that bad, and they lost to Georgia, but they beat Ole Miss.
Kentucky's a valid point. I will grant you that.
Who have we seen do that to Colorado? Who have we seen do that to BYU? Who have we seen do that to those two top-tier Big 12 teams? Nobody. And even Houston, I put in the category of Arkansas.
Utah just pushed BYU, and Baylor was a Hail Mary stop away from beating Colorado.
Pushed or won. Who won the games?
Utah pushed BYU.
Who won between Ole Miss and Kentucky? So we're talking top tier winning against the bottom tier, or vice versa. There you go. Oklahoma State pushed BYU. Who won the game? That's what it comes down to. That's what the committees, and they're going to talk about. Close game. They're going to say Northern Illinois beat Notre Dame. We're not going to talk about Alabama struggled in the first half against USF for 3 quarters. Who won the game? And also Sagarin rating for whatever it's worth. Big 12 is the second best conference in the country. I don't know if that matters for anything, actually. And 12 of the Big 12 16 programs still in contention for the conference title. That's pretty cool, too.
That's the point that I'm trying to get at.
Yeah.
The number of teams that feel like they can play at that level, I think it is higher. I think it's higher in the Big, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm saying that's what makes the league so chaotically good. And
Mississippi State would get killed by any, but in the same vein, Oklahoma State would get killed by anybody at the top of the Big 12. It seems like right now, as they have in the past. I'll leave you with this too. We may have more time. I don't know. Half of the Big 12.
We have 60 seconds.
Half of the Big 12's games this year. 50 games in conference. 25 decided by 1 score. That's crazy. How do you do that?
By the way, here are the point spreads in the Big 12 this week. This is like NFL stuff. 1.5, 10. How about Colorado minus 10 against Utah? Goodness gracious. 1.5, 10, 3, 9, 9, 3.
That's awesome.
It's just phenomenal.
And Colorado has an average margin of victory of 17.2. Colorado margin of victory 17.2 in Big 12 play. The Buffs are hot right now.
The Buffs are indeed very hot right now. If I say, hey, you can put $50 down on one team to win the Big 12, not named BYU, who are you picking?
The Colorado Buffaloes. Deion Sanders, baby.
What a time to be alive. What a time to be alive. Drake Toll, Locked On Big 12. Appreciate it as always, Drake. Awkward outro in 3, 2, 1.
I had waffles for breakfast. Really quickly, before we talk about will BYU lose a game the rest of this year, today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is America's #1 sports book. I keep trying to tell you this. And right now you can go bet on BYU to win by 3 this weekend against Kansas. Or bet on Kansas to win the game. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place, or in college football. When you get a hunch in the middle of a game, check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets, $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Download the FanDuel app today. Visit FanDuel. It is America's #1 sportsbook, and you can win money. FanDuel.com.